A Mochi moment from Mark, who writes, I just want to thank you for making GLP-1s affordable. What would have been over $1,000 a month is just $99 a month with Mochi. Money shouldn't be a barrier to healthy weight. 3 months in, and I have smaller jeans and a bigger wallet. You're the best. Thanks, Mark. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Mark is a Mochi member compensated for his story.
You know that thing where you get an amazing pair of shoes at a really great price and want to tell everyone about it? Yeah, so do we. Here at Designer Shoe Warehouse, we'll give you something to brag about, like the latest styles from brands you love, or the trends everyone's obsessing over, or shoes that make you feel like, well, you. So go ahead, show off a little. Find shoes that get you at prices that get your budget. Head to your DSW store or DSW.com today. DSW, let us surprise you.
All right, so we're back with what happened to who killed Molly Miller and Colt Haynes. Just to preface this, Stewart, you come on here in a very kind of timely fashion because we got breaking news yesterday in regards to the fact that they ID'd the human remains that were discovered over a month and a half ago, not too far from where Molly and Colt and the car was abandoned after the high-speed chase that Con Nip did. So it has been confirmed by the medical examiner's office, and the Chickasaw Nation put out the press report yesterday saying that both the sets of remains that were found were ID'd as Molly Miller and Colt Haynes. So very auspicious time to be on the podcast to kind of really talk about that. I mean, we had a pretty good idea that it was probably them. We were getting signals from our sources saying it wasn't just the remains they found other things as well. They found articles of clothing and other items that will be revealed probably at a later time that can be attached to either Molly or Colt. Now it's like, what did they die from? I guess that's the next question that,
absolutely.
And it's also bittersweet. I mean, this has been 13 years for these families not knowing what happened to them, and there's always that little bit of hope that maybe they were alive. You always have that hope, and it's really sad.
Exactly right.
And it's really heartbreaking that these young people died in this fashion and took 13 years to find their bodies. And that's what we wanted to talk to you about, because after everything that we've looked into in this case from the beginning, we've been working with Paula on this for 8 years. And Paula is the one that really spearheaded this whole thing for the family because Molly's mother had asked her to.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if your child goes missing, what do you do? I don't know if I could be out in the press and fighting and everything. So Paula took the baton from Molly's mother to help and really went out in the public and started making a lot of noise.
Yeah.
So after kind of looking at this case a little bit, we wanted to get your thoughts about those early days after the high-speed chase. What could have been done differently, and why did it take 13 years to find these kids?
Yeah. So at the time of the incident, I think it was maybe a couple of days later, they found the car, the abandoned car that Nip just left out there, I guess.
It took 2 weeks to find that car.
Yeah, okay, 2 weeks. So, and in the middle of that time, I guess was it a few days afterwards that the sheriff did finally acknowledge that Molly and Colt are missing.
No, it took him a couple of weeks too.
Okay.
Like he wouldn't do
really,
it.
There's 2 weeks that nothing happened.
Right. Yeah. He basically was saying they were runaways. And when Paula had been demanding and her family, her other cousin and other people were demanding a missing persons report be done. And the sheriff was like, no, they're runaways. And we even have a police report that the sheriff wrote on the 23rd of July, which is several weeks later, saying that Molly was a runaway at that point. And he even told the media, because I interviewed the news reporter who covered the case in the beginning from Texas. And she said that Joe Russell told her that they were runaways. So she didn't pursue the story.
Got it. And specifically, he said that they went to Wichita Falls. So it's not like he said they just ran away. Yeah, he said that they went to Wichita Falls, which is, probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours southeast or southwest of that area.
Yeah.
So it's from a law enforcement perspective, I mean, how much do you lose in that 2-week period in an investigation like that?
Well, I mean, you lose a lot, but go back a second to talk about, what do we have? We have 3 young kids, 2 with already, I guess, one is a cousin of the sheriff, and then the other has, I think, some drug activities and known drug involved in the drug world. Gets in a high-speed chase. I assume that he eluded the police enough that when he abandoned the car, the police weren't exactly, right behind him, and then it took a while to find the car. You have to get in the mindset of what maybe that officer on the ground was thinking at the time. These idiots just, I couldn't. They got away from me, and who knows what happened.
Well, let me stop you right there, because they were actually called off the chase.
Understand that, yeah. So that's an interesting thing too.
And they knew, and they ID'd even the 911 operator. They knew who he was. They knew it was Con.
And so they knew it was Con. The sheriff calls off the chase, and then were there ever any phone records checked to see who Con had called that night? I mean, I foresee that, like, maybe during this chase, he's calling the sheriff saying, "Hey, call these guys off me,"
Yeah, no, we have phone records, and we probably should have sent those to you, but we've analyzed those online on our podcasts too. We had Jody Barth, who was a retired Illinois state investigator and coroner, and she did a minute by minute, like, chronological analysis of those 2 days, the 7th and the 8th.
Yep.
And Con was checking his voicemail a lot. A lot of people were calling Con,
right.
But he wasn't calling anybody in general, not during the chase. The only ones that were calling during the chase was Molly. She called 911, and it was like an interrupted, you don't hear her say anything, but she called 911.
Right.
And then they were calling other people, and they were calling friends when they dumped out of the car, and having friends coming to get them. So there was frantic calling going on both sides.
Exactly. Yeah.
But also, the sheriff called off the chase for several reasons. One of them, he said, was because Con had done this so many times before, they didn't want to wreck another police car.
Right.
So,
and I know that the sheriff is later convicted on corruption charges. I don't necessarily find that suspicious. Maybe that this is just this idiot Con is out doing this again. It's not worth wrecking a car over. Just let him go. I can see that maybe as maybe a plausible explanation. Not necessarily that there's anything sinister behind it. But this thing about that they just so the car's abandoned, and then they just where do they go from there? They're not that far. I mean, it is somewhat remote out there, but it's not that far that you couldn't just start walking and get back somewhere.
No, and they were on service streets and everything. The other thing that was interesting is the fact that they knew it was Con. So why didn't they let him go, abandon the chase? Don't do that anymore. But you know where he lives. Why didn't you roll up on his house like an hour later?
Exactly.
Or at least
let him go. Let him go. We know where he lives. 1-2 hours. We'll go see him when he gets home. Or in the first thing in the morning. Yes, that doesn't make sense. And so I guess that didn't happen. So now you start. This is when you start wondering. Is there some link? Is there some connection here that goes higher, that is more sinister, especially when Molly and Colt don't show up, and and then they're missing, and then So Cindy, to get back to your original question, yes, a lot of things could have been done differently at the start here, but ultimately too, another big question in this, and I don't think that we have the answer to this, is how do they die? And so, that's going to answer a lot of questions when we get that cause of death as to, that should narrow some of this down a little bit. But, based on a case that I've worked that has some very, very similar elements to this, the bodies are only going to be able to tell you so much, unfortunately, because I'm betting that, it's probably a lot of decomposition, and it just may actually be just strictly dry bones. And those are difficult cases to determine cause of death. I know that because I had one just like it. We had a witness in a civil rights case that disappeared on Mother's Day weekend. She was found by hunters in some woods on Labor Day weekend. So just from, May to September, but in the, deep, humid East Texas woods, by the time the hunters found the body, it was all bones. And then when the autopsy was done on the bones, they really couldn't determine cause of death. There was no obvious trauma to any of the bones, like a gunshot or a stabbing or whatever. We just had to speculate that maybe she was strangled. But so again, depending on the state of the bodies, cause of death may be difficult to determine in this case.
Stewart, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So I was an FBI agent for 29 years. I was a street agent my entire career. I was in Little Rock, Chicago, and Dallas. And then when I say Dallas, I was actually in what was called the Tyler RA, the Tyler Resident Agency, which is a satellite office out of the Dallas office. When you were in of 29 years, I was in the Tyler RA. And so when you work when you're in a small office, you work almost literally every type of case there is out there. All the traditional FBI stuff, bank robberies, kidnappings, extortions, drug trafficking, bank fraud, white collar crime stuff. But we worked a lot of stuff along with the locals too, violent crimes. And in the one case that I'm talking about was a civil rights case involving a police officer who would roll up on prostitutes and in a relatively small town. And invariably the prostitutes would have drugs on them, or they'd have outstanding warrants. And for the low price of having sex with him in the back of his car, they didn't have to go to jail. And so
that does sound a lot like this case. I mean, that's what happened with the sheriff is.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, with his son and the one lady that stayed at the house and everything with him, when I was reading that, to me, it was just like, wow, I've seen this before. And so ultimately what happened was we got an indictment against the officer. He was out pending trial. When we gave discovery to his attorney, he figured out who his witnesses were, and he started with the best one. She was, I guess, his favorite. He had actually taken her to his house. She was able to draw an accurate map of the inside of his house. She was our best witness, and she was the first one to go missing. And like I said, we unfortunately found her body in the woods. Because we never could get a cause of death. We never were able to bring murder charges against the officer. But man, he's highly suspicious, and I still hope that maybe one day there is some other evidence or something that comes forward that he could still be charged in it.
Wow. So he's out walking around.
Yeah, he did. Well, he did 15 years on the civil rights violations because it's really interesting. What happened was our witness went missing. Her name was Terry. Terry goes missing. We don't know where she is. She just vanished. There was a second witness, Evelyn, that this officer rolled up on 1-2 o'clock in the morning, tries to talk her to get into his car. She's suspicious and hinky about it, doesn't want to do it. Then he chases her down and wraps a belt around her neck and starts dragging her back toward his car. The good Lord was watching out for her that night because the belt broke. And that tells you how hard he was jerking her, that a leather belt broke. And at the same time, a car kind of was in the vicinity. It spooked him a little bit and he ran away. She got to the police that night. We arrested him later that morning, and he faced the civil rights charges and the attempted kidnapping, the assault on her. So he ended up doing 17 years between Fed and state time, but we never got him on the murder, any murder case. So and also there was another prostitute that went missing in that same time frame that was not part of our case, but we think he had thought that maybe she would be a witness against him as well. So, and I tell you, I'll tie even further into this, how it goes into Molly and Colt's case. This same officer that, again, we put him away for civil rights, but we started hearing a lot of different things about him. And there was another young couple maybe a tad older than Molly and Colt, but her name was Tara Blue, and I'm forgetting the boy's name. But they went missing on Thanksgiving weekend, I think 2001. And there was a violent scene, a lot of blood, but no bodies whatsoever. And they're still missing to this day. So when this other case happened and this officer got in trouble, we started hearing a lot of things that maybe he had been behind this incident with this Tara Blue and was the cause of her missing, and that she had actually been one of his informants back in the day. That was never confirmed, but I tell you what, a lot of it fits. And so again, when I started reading over this case, I'm like, I cannot believe this. It's like history repeating itself here. And it all ties into this, these kind of small town connections, and, when people are tied in with each other, and the local law enforcement maybe has their hand in the cookie jar a little bit. It's just remarkably sad. And, because Cindy, back to your point about how that, there is some closure on this, that the bodies have been identified. And I absolutely agree with that. I can't think of anything worse than not knowing about a family member that just absolutely vanished. And, it's just really sad. So I wonder if going back to Molly's case, do we know if there were, if there's any specifics as to how the bodies were found? Were they buried? Were they just out on the ground?
We get bits and pieces from sources that we have, either through the family or people and stuff like that have heard stuff. But no, we don't have any details. We do know that I think they were partially buried. So I don't know whether that was just over time, just a brush and erosion kind of buried them. Okay. That's what we don't know. We don't know how far they were from each other, but or how close they were. The only piece of information that we know to be true is that they were about 0.6 of a mile from where the car was abandoned. And we had been out there. We'd been out there. We were right near where that car was abandoned. And that car, where it was abandoned, was basically, I would say, probably 1/4 mile from the fence line of the Nip property. And then and then north of it was another property, which is the property, I believe, in question, which they found the remains. So it wasn't that far. I mean, 0.6 of a mile it's a distance, but still in that landscape, it's not that big of a,
But we
distance.
believe, just from the research that we've done and talking to other law enforcement agents, that car was moved. That car was moved right after the chase, and then brought back after people started searching, because all of a sudden, there's family members out there, and all of a sudden everybody's looking for them. And I guess they just thought no one was going to look for these kids. Right. And then all of a sudden the car shows up. And it's like, well, wait a minute. How did you not see this car? Right. Like, you've been out there. You were out there with the Noah Presgrove case. We've been out there many times. And knowing that Molly is, from that area, she knows those woods. And she was giving them specific directions on where she was on the phone call, telling people, this is where we are. This is where we are. And her phone the next day, she was talking to people the next day. So what happened to them? Her phone, her last phone call was 9:39 the next morning.
Yeah. Well, one thing that just to me doesn't make sense at all is the chase is called off. So he had to realize, okay, they're not chasing me anymore. Why abandon the car? It was his girlfriend's car. She reports it's stolen. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
But there's also conversations in the phone logs between Khan's girlfriend and Khan's mom, like frantically, back and forth.
Right.
So,
but on the audio dispatch from the 911, they identify the car as belonging to his girlfriend while they're out there. So they already knew whose car it was.
Got it.
because they had the plate number.
They had the plate number, so they ran the plates, and you can hear it on the dispatch. She says, "We know who the car belongs to, and we know who's driving it."
So, is girlfriend involved in this at all? Other than her car?
Other than her car, no. The only thing that she got charged with was insurance fraud because she reported the car stolen. It wasn't. She let him take the car.
Yep.
So that she got, I don't know if she did any jail time or anything, but she was charged with that. Yeah. So that the fact that she was covering for him, in some respect, and that's the thing that really kind of the layers of onions that we've been trying to peel apart for this whole case is that there's we never said that Con did anything to these kids.
We never said Con killed these kids. We don't know what happened to them.
We just know that he was the last one to see them alive.
And he's the last to see them alive. And he's also when he sees them last, it's in a very suspicious circumstance. In other words, you're evading the police. You're running from the cops. Is it possible maybe that there was some that this whole thing was an insurance scam? That this is something that Con used to do all the time. He would he was baiting. If you talk to they had the Ryan Parsley, who was the officer, the responding officer. He was sitting parked somewhere, I think, in a convenience store or somewhere in town, and Con literally saw him and then just stood like a donut and spun out and kicked rocks up at the car to basically bait him into chasing him, because he had done it before. And then what he would do is he'd go on these back roads to his house, and he knew that the cops would probably either won't be able to see him because of the dust, or they'll abandon the search. But they always knew it was Con.
Right. And because later on he does it after this too, and actually gets caught by OHP. And Ronnie Hampton, who was the OHP officer at the time, was able to at least get a prosecution, and he did at least 5 years for that. But it's not. You got to look at the behavior. And then he also knew where he dropped off, where he abandoned the car, because so some of Colt's friends came to Con's house that night asking him, "Hey, listen, I got Colt on the phone. He's yelling and screaming, saying, you know where we are. Tell these guys where I am, so I can, so my legs hurt. He apparently had a broken leg or broken ankle, and I need you to come find him." And then he's yelling and screaming at Con. Con doesn't say anything. And Con basically said, "Oh, he's where we took the Mustang," meaning that the other car that they stole. So it's like he knew where they were, and he wouldn't let them cut through their property because it was an easier way to get there. And we thought that was kind of interesting. And the fact that, why didn't you just go show them? Because it wasn't the cops looking for them. The threat of police around. He has, Joe Russell, the sheriff, obviously is not looking for him. Otherwise, Love County deputies would have been at his house that night. So why not just go show these three people where they are so they can get them?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's confusing to try to pin together what happened, but man, I tell you what, there's so much smoke there around Con.
Oh,
you just cannot dismiss it whatsoever.
Yeah, and he's interviewed with law enforcement before, but I think the latest was he has a lawyer, so how those interviews go. I mean, they're very structured, they're very curated, and there's not, and this has only happened over the last few years, so it's not immediately after. I mean,
a lot of people were scared to talk. They were afraid of the sheriff.
Exactly.
So in your experience working with small town corruption and things like that, tell us a little bit about the climate. Why does this happen?
Well, at least in my experience, I mean, a lot of it just boils down to there's money to be made in drugs, and in these small law enforcement offices, whether it's a sheriff's office, a little small local police department, these guys don't get paid a whole lot of money, unfortunately. And sometimes the temptation is to get in there and, protect dope deals and get paid that way. A lot of temptation. Another thing that's a real challenge in these cases is determining what's corrupt and what's incompetent. Sometimes it may be just a little combination of both. The other thing is sometimes people have to wear different hats. So in other words, in one case I had, there was the town marshal who was also involved in drug trafficking, was also the city fire marshal. And we didn't charge him with it, but we suspected that he was involved in an insurance fraud that was an arson. And then he investigated the fire as the fire marshal, that it, it looked like a faulty wiring caused the fire. And so sometimes it's very difficult, and everybody knows everybody. In other words, in bigger cities, you avoid conflict of interest things. You don't, you have relatives working for each other. In the small town, that's sometimes unavoidable, and it's not necessarily corrupt. So it's because a lot of these factors, it makes it really difficult sometimes to figure out, do I have a real corruption case here, or do I just have a small town situation where everybody knows everybody? They don't really know what they're doing. Did this murder case that happened, was it a situation where he doesn't know what he's doing? So that was what I found unique to working in these small towns, as to what it was. But on the other hand, sometimes it does turn out to be, there's really nothing here, but other times there absolutely is something there, and the corruption is off the charts. So, at least in Texas, a sheriff has a lot of power, a lot of autonomy. It takes a lot to bring a corruption case against a sheriff, either from the feds or from the Texas Rangers. So they occupy kind of a weird little space where they have kind of their own little kingdom, and within that, there's a lot of gray areas where corruption can happen and does happen. And I don't think that it sounds like Oklahoma, and especially this situation, is very, very similar. Talking about Sheriff Russell, I know he's later convicted on drugs related charges, but I'm surprised they didn't bring civil rights charges against him also for essentially his son extorting sexual favors from.
Yeah. I mean, he was given a choice whether going to trial or basically step down, and he got like house arrest.
And taking a plea bargain.
Bargain. So it was like he was getting the good old boy treatment, even at the grand jury level. I feel like, I mean, they basically said, listen, you can roll the dice on a jury trial, but you lose, and you're going to go away, or you can step down and take house arrest and no longer be a sheriff or any other kind of public official. Because he tried later on trying to get a job as a process server, and he couldn't get one. Yeah. So it's like, but he was there for 16 years.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He had 16 years. So he had a lot of, and while we were doing the podcast, we had, people calling us with tips, and a lot of the tips were about him, talking about, and people saying that, and there a lot of them were women saying that they've been pulled over by this guy, and
they were afraid of him,
and they were extorted, because he could just go and just plant something in your car, or if you had something on you, whether it was weed or something minor, stuff like that, he can trump up the charge and then manipulate you to the point where, he gets things that he wants, and using that. And you're right. I mean, sheriffs have, even everywhere, not even just in Oklahoma and Texas, they have an enormous amount of power. Usually when, we try to get access to police departments for documentaries, we usually gravitate to the sheriff's department, because the sheriff is the one who can say yes. He doesn't have to go through a city council or a city manager. He doesn't have to get it voted upon. The sheriff is the king. Yep. He controls the jails, he controls the county, and that's like you said, it's an enormous amount of power. And he's also got.
They're politicians. I mean, just as much as they're a law enforcement officer, they're also politicians, and usually guys that can get elected. They have a certain amount of charisma, and just to the general public, They're like, hey, I like that guy. And so that's how they can stay in office so long. And sometimes that charisma is is genuine, and you have and he's also a good law enforcement officer. I've seen that, but I've also seen it the other way, where you have a very charming, charismatic guy, and he's just as corrupt as the day is long. So, he appears like one thing on the surface, but behind the scenes, it was really bad. So, yes. So yes, sheriffs have a lot of power in these small rural counties. There's not a lot of oversight from anyone else, from either the state police or from the feds. And so they kind of occupy this weird little area where they can really, the corruption can just run wild.
Yeah. And for this case in particular, the OSBI was involved early on. The FBI was involved early on. I think the U.S. Marshals were as well. Mm-hmm. But then all of a sudden they kind of retreated back.
Yeah.
And we don't know why they retreated back from this case. And then fortunately for Molly and Colt, and for Molly in particular, because she was part Chickasaw, the BIA saw a way of getting involved in it because of her background. And that opened up a whole nother, because they weren't controlled by the local corruption.
That's right.
They're a federal organization. And they have.
And the Chickasaw Nation.
And the Chickasaw Nation, they were involved because they're not governed by that county.
They're a federal agency.
Yeah. So thank God that they were able to kind of take it, because it was going nowhere.
Yeah.
It literally was going nowhere.
No, we were out there with Maureen O'Connell and Cheryl.
Yeah.
And we did a dig, and we drained a pond. We independently
How
financed.
close was the pond to where the bodies were actually found?
It was a distance, but it was in a property adjacent to it, so it was in the general area. It was on Long Hollow Road. I mean, it's like you have tons of acreage and stuff. But the reason why we looked into that, because there was an errant 911 call that was sent from that pond from a person of interest. This guy named Colby Barrick, who was there. It was his phone call. So he was living on the NIP property, and he has a checkered past. He had been he'd been in federal prison from weapons charges, and apparently and there was some drug stuff, related stuff. Don't have his full rap sheet, but he was a tough individual, and his phone really.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
I don't even know why, but it dialed 911 from that Moxley Pond.
And we don't know if he did it on purpose.
Yeah, because they were talking, because the 911 operator who took the call, when she called Sheriff Joe, said, listen, they're out at Moxley Pond, got a 911 call. They're talking about Molly. They're talking about Colt and like that. And it's really hard to hear from the recording, but she must have had a cleaner connection.
Right.
Because she specifically says they're talking about Molly, she's talking about Colt.
Well, when we had to analyze, Maureen O'Connell analyzed it, and some other people had scrubbed it so that you could hear the audio more clearly. And you could hear what they're saying. They're saying that they killed Molly, they shot her
through the mouth or something like that.
Something horrible. Yeah. And so anyway, that's why we decided to drain that pond.
Sure. That's an absolute valid lead. Yeah.
Yeah. And it looks, and if you see it, I don't know. I'll just have to show you too, but it's like a overflow pond in between two big lakes.
Okay.
So it's actually a spillover, so it comes down off of a little waterfall. But it's like a cavern. It's a little like crevice in the in inside the wood, so you can't see it from like above. Mm-hmm. So like when we brought the Maureen O'Connell and Cheryl out there, they first thing they said is, he goes, if I was going to dump a body somewhere, I would dump it here.
Sure.
You
Absolutely.
know. And it's like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
And, and it did hit cadaver dogs, but it wasn't, and there was other places where cadaver dogs hit too, but that's not the location where they found him.
So do you know from your sources what maybe tipped off that they did this search back in February where they found the bodies?
They have been, according to the, our sources, is that they've been wanting to search since the BIA. They've been wanting to do searches for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people want to do search, and warrants were
Rob, there was
turned
no
out.
search, no ground search done at the time.
There was actually Paula organized quite a few. I mean,
Over 30 searches.
Over 30 searches.
But this area had not been previously.
That particular area was not searched.
And that's only because they did not ask, for some reason, they didn't ask permission from this person who originally owned the property.
Okay.
They had been out there once. There were wild hogs.
Yeah.
They got spooked, and then they just moved on. And I think they never went back. And so that was always on the list to do. Mm-hmm. And then the owners changed. So
yeah. And then there was a whole thing when the BIA took over. They wanted to search because we got word about the BIA wanting to get involved when we were doing the pond. We were in Oklahoma, and because we were recruiting federally accredited cadaver dogs. Yeah. And there was one guy who came down, drove 3 hours from north of Oklahoma, had worked with the BIA before, and by the time he got there at 9 o'clock at night, and the Chickasaw Nation, when he got there that night, he said, "Listen," he goes, "I'll do this tomorrow." He goes, "But I'm just telling you," I says, "this thing's going to go federal. That's what I'm hearing. That's the word I'm getting." And I'm like, "What?" We were like shocked, and we're like, "What does that mean?" We didn't even know about the BIA or anything. And then literally a week after, when we hit on human remains, or not human remains, but cadaver dogs hit. That's when the owner of the property, Toby Thomas, got a call from the BIA and said, "You got to shut it down now. No more searching on your property." Right. So then we're like, okay, maybe this is elevated. He goes, because they want to do it professionally.
Yeah, we were really happy because that was our whole point in doing the podcast, was to get their attention.
Sure.
Or get someone's attention.
Get someone's attention.
Yeah. So then after that, then they were they started investigating, and for years they were trying to get on that property and get warrants, but no one would give them warrants. Even like other law enforcement before that, no one would give them warrants. So they had to coordinate with local landowners, and Toby Thomas was integral in this part because he's a very wealthy landowner in that area. He knows everybody, and so he was helpful in getting permission along with the BIA to get those properties searched. And then it just took off, and they did search earlier in the year. And I think in February or January, and they did but they found nothing. But when they came back the second time, I don't know whether they had better intel.
Well, they had a lot of people searching. I mean, we don't know the details of the search, but we do know there was a lot of people there.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, from your experience working in these small towns. I mean, we know a lot of sheriffs who are great people, really good people, law enforcement, officers who are wonderful human beings, and they, live in big cities, small towns, whatever. But I just think, in the beginning, what should have happened when these kids went missing?
Yeah. So I think what we touched on earlier, I mean, you should have, let him go. Yeah. It's not worth, I on this one point, I agree with Sheriff Russell on this. It's not worth wrecking a car. Let him go. Let's go pick him up in a couple hours. First off, that's what should have been done. And then certainly within all these calls, all these people saying, "Hey, they're out there, they're stuck. You got to go help them." And apparently there's just no response from law enforcement, to even look into this. Granted, again, that's one of the things that law enforcement kind of does to you. It makes you a little bit cynical. It's like, this is just these idiot dopers out here doing this again. I'm not going to waste my time with this. That's, again, one of those challenges that you have to, you have limited time and resources to cover things. And this just maybe, at the moment, just, this is not worth looking into. And so, that's golly, that's one of the hard things. And luckily it never happened to me, because there's a lot of times where I would, someone would call and you give you a set of facts, and it's like, you probe it a little bit, and it's just, credibility is not there. It's not worth, my time at the moment. I'll put it on the list and I'll get to it when I can. So luckily nothing like that. I guess I'd made the right call that, this is a low priority thing, and something that turned out not to be, never backfired on me. So, I know that could happen. It could a situation where an officer there's nothing corrupt about it. It just makes a decision that it's just not worth my time on this, or is it something else? And that's the thing in this case that looking at it from now, you can't dismiss because, now we know so much about the sheriff. We know his connection to Con Nip, not connection, relation. And that the sheriff, let this go on in his own house with his son. So, what else has he let go out there that, is bad? So, so initially, looking back now, obviously with knowing what we know, why isn't there just a full call out and, the whole place responds and there's grid searches everywhere and all that. And you just have to look at it from that time and place right at that moment,
Yeah.
But you said something interesting.
Yeah.
A bunch of dopers out there. You see, that's the thing.
Yeah.
If it was a college student who was missing or just someone else,
elderly woman,
or, someone else who they didn't consider a doper
right.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And, Molly was only 17. Shouldn't have an Amber Alert been done?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Like I said, there's a lot of things you can look back now and say. I don't know if Molly had any, and I'm not disparaging her, but
she had nothing.
Trying to give you the mindset that maybe that they would have had at the time. But and you're right, Rob, that's the reality of, I guess, of our world is that, or Cindy, if this had been a college student, that, or the mother of a prominent major network news show, then there probably would have been way more action taken at the time. And that, I guess really that's a sad commentary on our system that it seems certain people get priority that others don't. And I think obviously every human being is important, regardless of whether they might have a criminal history or what they're involved in at the time. No one should be murdered, and that's probably something that we just have to. I really don't know how to fix it because again,
it seems to be there's always a context with these cases.
Yes,
and it's like if the context falls within the parameters of what society deems to be valuable, then it's like, all right. But there's so many, and in addition, I mean, the BIA and the Chickasaw Nation. This is not, when we talk to people from there and like people connected to the Native Americans there, they're like, this happens all the time here. Women disappear all the time. Young people disappear all the time. Women are found on roadsides. People are found on roadsides.
We're getting so many requests, and we will get back to all of you. It's just been overwhelming the last couple of days, but we get a lot of requests from people to help them because they don't have any resources. Like, these cases, they just go cold. And
they do. And, I know we've talked about this on other cases that we've worked on, that, the lifeblood of a case is leads. You have to have leads. And there's a certain way, you can go out. There's ways to generate your own leads. You don't have to sit around and wait for the phone to ring. There's ways to do that. You can go out and then logically think about, well, could this have happened? Could that have happened? And follow it out that way. But even when you run all those type things down and you still come up empty, you do get to a point where, I just don't have anything else. I have no logical place to go in this case. If somebody just disappeared and I checked everything that I could check at the time, I don't know. I just, and that to me, that's, again, we talked about this earlier. That is for families, that has to be just gut wrenching. One of the hardest things I can imagine. Yes, you never want to hear of a loved one, being murdered or killed in any situation. But if you know what happened, then you can deal with it at the time and move on. But when they just disappear, it's got to be the worst thing because you always have that hope that they're still alive and that you'll see them again. So I don't mean to bring this down into some depressing.
No, it's reality.
It's really sad. It's really sad that we're grateful that their remains were identified and that they get their names back and that there's some resolution. There's never closure, but the fact that it happened in the first place and it could have been prevented. I mean,
Yes.
I don't understand why in the beginning it was just ignored and she was called a runaway for weeks and ignored. You know, if the family didn't do their searches and really start making noise, I don't.
Well, I'll tell you what really fascinates me about this is how does this turn from really almost kind of a juvenile prank, playing this game of getting the cops to chase me? How does that turn into 2 kids murdered? And we just don't really have that answer now. But hopefully the autopsy can really answer that question. I'm really hopeful that the autopsy can generate the answers to that. I really am.
Because I can understand if the situation of, say, something happened to Colt and he died, but the both of them?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
they were both making phone calls up until 9:30.
Molly was calling her friends the next morning. She was not.
See, and that's
some people try to say, "Oh, well, they died from exposure," but I don't believe that.
I mean, I've looked at that on the satellite view, and I mean, yes, young kids they could have probably ran, just get on the road and run and find a farmhouse. I mean, it's not that remote. Okay, I mean,
right.
That they couldn't get somewhere. So they're both together. There's clearly foul play. But what turned it to that? And then another interesting thing is what was the last phone call, Cindy? That the next morning it was like
9:39 a.m.
9 o'clock in the morning. She's still making phone calls. I mean, that tells me that that she has some freedom or some degree of that whoever did this doesn't have full control over at this point. So I mean that is what's baffling too. Where did this turn from a juvenile prank into a double homicide?
There's some speculation that it was a setup because Colt and Con did not like each other.
Right.
Colt and Con had both dated the same person. Right. There was a history there. They did not get along. No one really understood why. All the friends that we talked to couldn't understand why they were even together, except for a drug deal. Right. And maybe it was a potential drug deal gone wrong or a setup or something. We don't know. I mean, it's all speculation.
And then Molly was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I've always believed that. I've always believed she was in the wrong. I never
she'd
thought
only met Colt like a
week before. 2 weeks before.
Yep. Could be a situation like this. Maybe they're all out there and they, Colt and Con hate each other. So maybe, tempers flared. They got in a fight and because it's really, I'll tie this in, but maybe they got in a fight and Con ended up killing him just in this fight, not necessarily meaning to. And then, hey, this guy's dead. I'm not going to get in trouble for this. And so that's why Molly had to die. And tying this back to a case on an Indian reservation, it was about 6 months before I retired. I had never worked a case on a reservation before. And that was that very, very situation. 2 guys got in a fight over a girl, and the one guy hit the other guy just right, I guess, and it killed him. So it can happen. It could be just it happened, in a fight, and that could be what it is. Could be a lot of things, but there's definitely something went wrong between this car chase and their bodies being found, and that's the big question. And with you guys on it, I don't have any doubt that you're gonna get to the bottom of it.
Well, we also want to make it clear we don't want to wrongfully convict or wrongfully accuse anyone. Con is not, as far as we know, there's no evidence to suggest that he hurt Molly or Colt or he had any hand in their deaths at this point.
Yeah. We're only speculating.
Yeah, it's only speculation.
But because he was the last person to see them,
exactly,
I think you have to consider him your top suspect, or at least definitely a suspect,
or a gateway to some of the answers. I mean, and he's in interviews with law enforcement says he doesn't know what happened to them.
And I think that he knows more than what he's saying. I don't necessarily, like I said, we don't know how they died, but I can't imagine that 3 people go into the woods, 2 people end up dead, and 1 person comes out alive, and that person doesn't know more than what they're saying.
Exactly. I couldn't put it any better, Cindy.
Yeah. And then how, and there's been some speculation that they, like we said earlier, they died of exposure, and it was like July. So it wasn't like the winter time.
But like you said, Stuart, we've been out there. You can get to the road. Like even when I've been deep in the woods, I, who am not from there, could still figure out a way to get to the street.
Exactly.
Especially in daylight. I can see at nighttime because it's
at nighttime, it would be a little sketchy.
We've been in the woods there at nighttime.
Night, which is scary too. But I mean, during the day when you can see, I mean, there's some witness statements that were saying that Molly said that she got a ride and that, never mind, they got a ride. Well, we don't know. And from your experience working with a lot of people in small towns and informants, and, they always say, well, those people aren't reliable witnesses because they're druggies or this or that. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I'll go back to that civil rights case with the police officer taking the prostitutes to the cemetery. What made that case compelling was, again, this is a societal thing, I guess, or really more of an experience thing. But if you're dealing with people with a long criminal history, you always have to question their credibility. Is this somebody that is, can be relied upon to be telling you the truth? And the honest truth, or at least in my experience, is no, you cannot, because people that have a history of being involved in being arrested, being involved in the justice system, they just really, when you start talking to them, they start off with a lie, and you have to whittle your way to the truth, and then you might get to it. But in this one case, the prostitutes, although it was a small town, they actually didn't know each other. They were all separate, and they told remarkably consistent stories. So when you add, each one on their own, they may not be necessarily credible, but when you add it up together and they're telling the same story, you have to take it seriously, and we did. And so that's when we brought charges against the police officer. But yeah, so again, that's one of the challenges of it is trying to figure out, are they telling me the truth or not? That's why I'm always relentless on trying to corroborate any information that I get independently as best you can. There's no magic formula to it, but if you're talking informants, really, leads are the lifeblood of a case, but informants are very, very important as well. They can make or break a case, but in my experience, a good informant, they're a good informant for a reason, is because they're involved in crime. And it's only a matter of time before they get arrested, before, as I say, they go south on you. And, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So,
but in a court of law, I mean, they use informants on the stand all the time, and they convict people all the time. That's so right. It's like, it's a catch-22. You have someone with a criminal past who actually sees something, who knows something about a particular homicide or crime. Do you, as a law enforcement officer, do you use that? If you have nothing else, sure as hell, you're going to use that.
If that's all you've got, absolutely. And if it's a situation where we go to trial, that person is going to be cross-examined. The defense attorney is going to attack them 7 ways to Sunday and try to make them look like they're not credible. And in those circumstances, you can get a conviction because generally that falls down to the jury's impression of this person. The jury has to make that decision. Are they telling the truth or not?
Yeah.
And so absolutely can happen. But when you have to use an informant like that, or somebody with a checkered past, you try to verify and corroborate as much as you can what they said.
So in a case like this, how long would it take for the FBI, or how would the FBI get involved?
So generally, I'm not exactly sure Oklahoma City, I don't know exactly where the Oklahoma resident agencies are, the smaller.
Well, they
satellite
had one.
offices.
They had one very close by. I think like in Ardmore or
Okay,
very
yeah,
close to
Ardmore. That would make sense. Okay, so
there was an office. There was one
I would
agent
think
there. I think.
that really, if it's like where I worked, you have these ongoing relationships with the locals anyway, because you work together with them all the time. Probably the Bureau would have at least been involved almost from the start on this.
Yeah.
But I can't confirm or deny that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then where do you think, now that they have positively identified the remains, where do you think, like, if you, from your standpoint, if you were investigating a case, what's, obviously that it validates the search, number one, but number two is like, does it take the investigation into a different phase? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. So again, like I said, what they're wanting right now is what the autopsy will show. Will it show, cause of death? Another thing too, hopefully, that they very carefully process this scene, which I'm sure they did, to try to gain any other forensic evidence that might, if they're buried out there, did they,
don't take it.
Would there have been some, did the killer leave something out there as they were being buried that could be tied to them? So hopefully, there would be something along that line that was found that could forensically tie the killer to the scene. So yeah, as you say, Rob, the next phase now, like I said, is the autopsy. You got to get a specific cause of death. Let's find out what the injuries are to the body. I can tell you a lot. Were they shot? Were they stabbed? So that would imply then that there's a weapon. Can we find a weapon? And you just go from there. Unfortunately, it's just 13 years too late.
Yeah.
That makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah.
So sad. It's really, really sad. Anyway, thank you, Stewart. It's always great to see you and get your expertise on these cases. We appreciate you. Yes, Cindy, I agree 1,000%. This is really sad and tragic. But it is interesting. It's there's some really interesting elements to it that, if you look at it just as an investigator, it's a puzzle to try to solve. And you guys always seem to find the interesting ones, and then bringing that with your expertise and your diligence on it, you at least have brought some measure of peace to the family. And hopefully this thing can be solved and someone can go to jail. Yeah, exactly.
That's the hope for everybody, to find some justice.
Absolutely. All right, Stewart. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Thanks. Always great to see you.
You too.
This podcast is supported by MIDI Health. Are you in midlife, feeling dismissed, unheard, or just plain tired of the old healthcare system? You're not alone. In fact, even today, 75% of women seeking care for menopause and perimenopause issues are left entirely untreated. But it's time for a change. It's time for MIDI. MIDI's not just a healthcare provider. It's a women's telehealth clinic founded and supported by world-class leaders in women's health. Their clinicians provide one-on-one, face-to-face consultations where they truly listen to your unique needs. They offer a full range of holistic, data-driven solutions that isn't one-size-fits-all care. This is care uniquely tailored for you. At MIDI, you will find that their mission is clear: to help all women thrive in midlife, giving them access to the healthcare they deserve. Because they believe midlife isn't the middle at all. It is the beginning of your second act. Ready to feel your best and write your second act script? Visit joinmidi.com today to book your personalized, insurance-covered virtual visit. That's joinmidi.com. MIDI, the care women deserve.